Okay, welcome to our third session of today. We're going to continue with a couple of final remarks. So let me open a new window here. Okay, so up to this point, we discussed fertility transition, mortality transition, and the economic logic behind such things. And we also discussed what happened to the Solow model when we extend the population growth rate to make it as an endogenous variable, right? A pattern such as this one, right? Because if the economy is getting richer and richer, population growth rate is first increasing and then decreasing. Now, I want you to introduce an issue that is called task-based framework. And then another issue I'm going to cover is the need ratio. I will explain what this is in a moment. Now, let's first look at the task-based framework. Task-based framework is this. So basically, it is a newer version of thinking about production functions, right? So this is the classical view of the production function, right? And this is our main framework for this semester. But there is an alternative framework, which is called the task-based framework, okay? So what is it? So even if we extend our framework with technology and human capital, okay, this is still a classical approach, all right? But there is a new, so this is the classical approach. Now the task-based framework differentiates different types of tasks and occupations. Okay, so if you want to take a look, you can check a particularly nice paper by Acemoğlu and author, or I don't, he might be French. This is, I guess, 2011 Handbook of Labor Economics. Okay. So the idea is this: there are different tasks and different occupations, and each occupation, I mean, a member of an occupation will have, depending on his or her education, will have different productivity levels for the tasks, for different tasks. So let's think about this in a very simple model, right? So let's suppose that there are two tasks. So one is cognitive, and the other is manual. Okay, so suppose that you are running this firm. So you have two types of tasks to be performed for the good or the service to be produced, right? So let's denote the cognitive tasks as CT and the manual task as MT, right? Then you may imagine a production function like this. So the total production will be a function of total cognitive service you need plus total manual service you need. Now here, theta is a share parameter, and rho is a parameter that determines the elasticity of substitution, right? So here, there is an elasticity of substitution between cognitive and manual works, and it is equal to 1 over 1 minus rho. Okay, now this is a CES production function, constant elasticity of substitution production function. Okay, and the idea is this: now you may have two different workers. One would be, so for cognitive task, you would have, for the production of the cognitive task, you might use human labor, or you might use robot labor. Okay, and similarly, for the performance of the manual task, you might use human labor, H, or robot labor. Okay, so H is for human labor, and R is for robot labor. Now, here, of course, gamma C is different than gamma M, and depending on your robotic technology, gamma M typically should be larger than gamma C, right? Because robots are very good right now. Maybe in the future, they will be also good for the cognitive tasks. But right now, they are very good for the manual tasks, right? Transportation, lifting something, right? All these things right now, in terms of manual tasks, robots are really, you may also imagine this, of course. So gamma M would be larger than 1. So robotic task is greater than cognitive task, right? But gamma C could be less than 1. So in the cognitive task, right? In the cognitive task, human engineers and human scientists would still be outperforming the robots. Okay? But in terms of the manual tasks, because here you have 1, right? Here you have 1 times human labor, 1 times manual labor. So as you see, it is much more realistic, right? It is much more realistic than this one, or actually this one. Okay? And right now, economists, at least in their research, they use such production functions that depend on the task-based framework. And I wanted to add this session to our discussion of employment and population, because that type of framework will have certain policy implications, right? Suppose that you are a middle-aged worker. Now, your education about robotic technologies and artificial intelligence or computer-based technologies would be becoming each day more obsolete. Okay, so your skills depreciate. Instead, if you are a young worker, you know how to use cloud technologies, you know how to use other types of software, etc. So technological sophistication of the economy, and of course, this production function is still very simple. There could be other ways of extending these variables. For instance, theta could be changing in time, right? Or there could be even a larger number of tasks, right? Suppose that the production uses an infinite number of tasks in theory, right? So here you have different tasks. Rho could be the same. So there are many different ways of studying such issues, and then you can also differentiate people by their education, right? High school graduates, college graduates, and PhD, let's say, graduates, or PhD and master's graduates. Then in between, here you have people with less than high school. Here, college dropouts, right? So there are many different education levels in the economy. And each of these different people in education levels. So suppose that this is E2. So suppose that this is E1, E2, E3, E4, and E5. Now, you have to assign these different people to different tasks, right? X1, X2, X3. Let's say there are let's say there are 3 tasks, right? X1, X2, X3, and you have 5 education groups: E1, E2, E3, E4, E5. Now, of course, these tasks could be increasingly more cognitive. Okay, so now you may imagine that PhD and people with PhD and master degrees, they would be performing for the most cognitive task. Then you may imagine E3 and E4 going to the middle range cognitive task, and E1 and E2 go to the manual task. But it is also possible that E2 can be serving that market as well, that task as well. Okay, or E4 could be serving that task as well, and E3 also could be serving. So there is competition as well, right, between people from different education groups. And luckily, in some countries such as Germany and US to some extent, and some other countries, we have nice data, nice micro level and occupation level data. So right now we have many different possibilities to ask nice research questions and answer them. But those models with the task-based framework are a little bit more complicated. So at the undergraduate level, I'm gonna show you the classical production function approach, right, with the Cobb-Douglas one or the CS ones. But there are many different possibilities out there if you want to pursue PhD or master level studies. So you can study different types of task-based models depending on your research question. Now, the last thing I want to discuss is the NEAT ratio. So this is the abbreviation for not in education nor in employment. So okay, let me, not in employment nor in education and training. Okay, so NEAT. So NEAT ratio is a particularly interesting indicator for an economy. Okay, and typically we look at NEAT ratio for the young people. Okay, NEAT ratio for 15 to 24, and then NEAT ratio for 30, I guess, or together? Maybe that could be 34. I'm not sure. You can check. And also, we can do it for males and females. Okay? And why is that important? Because if you are not working, suppose that you are 16 years old. 16 years old. And if you are not in employment, and if you are not in education, or if you are not taking any classes, any independent, courses, etc., or if you are not in the on-the-job training, then what are you doing? Right? Ideally, you should be in school, but suppose that you tried high school and you dropped out from high school. Now you are at 16, and what exactly are you doing? Okay, that's a very important question, because this is a waste of resources for an economy. If you think about it generally, that person, female or male, should be in school. If not in school, there could be a reason. Of course, we are assuming away, disabled people, people serving the state, etc., etc. So military people, etc. So forget about them. But if you're a citizen, suppose that you are 23 years old, and you are, let's say, female, high school educated, and you are in need. So what are you doing? Why aren't you doing? Why are not you are a participant of labor market? Why not college? Okay. So that's very important. And Turkey and many other developing countries record high need ratios. Okay. In Muslim countries, the situation is especially troublesome for young females. Okay. So that's certainly something we should think about. Why? Because we are missing our demographic window of opportunity. There is something called demographic window of opportunity. What this means is that there is a certain historical episode for any country, let's say 1982 to 2008. I'm just making this up for some country I. Within that region, within that time interval, the share of working age population is largest. Why? Because each and every economy is aging, right? An important consequence of fertility decline is that median age is getting larger, and when this happens, the ratio of working age population to the total population first increases and then decreases. Why is that important? So there is this, let's say, the window of opportunity, right? Why is that important? Because this is an episode that you should use these people, a large majority of your population that is in working age. You should put these people into labor force, and then you have to employ them. Why? Because you want to increase aggregate GDP. Why? Because you want to increase per capita GDP. Okay. So I think that's all for today. Let me stop sharing now. Can I stop sharing? Is that all okay?
Evet hocam, teşekkürler.
Okay. So we have less than 2 minutes. If you have a very quick question, I can answer it. Otherwise, we can rejoin again if you have many questions. But if you do not have any input, I'm gonna see you next week. I'm gonna stop here right now.
Hocam ödevi akşam mı yüklersiniz, hemen yükler misiniz?
Akşam yüklerim muhtemelen.
Teşekkür ediyorum.
Okay then. Yes. Please be alert for the assignment. And then next week, we're gonna discuss human capital, especially with respect to education and health. Okay. So we want to understand how people with higher education and higher years of schooling and better health would contribute to the productive forces of a nation. Okay. All right then. See you next week. Take care and work hard as always.
İyi günler hocam.
İyi
Okay,
günler
bye-bye.
hocam, görüşürüz.
Bye bye.